Hello, how's everyone doing? How's everybody been? Hopefully good. So yeah, I kind of made a video last night, but the video just stopped halfway. So I'm more or less gonna recap on that video and just bring up some valid points that I made in it. Which just seems to be this whole premise of these videos is just making a whole bunch of valid points. That way you're actually able to better understand the gospel, to understand grace. I'm sorry, I'm messing with a rapper. And to, just to help you and to aid you out, that way you actually are able to grow and mature as you actually begin practicing these commandments of Christ and, these virtues also that Christ himself has, you're obligated to automatically feel compelled to view these things as commandments. And I just said it like that, but that's essentially what these verses actually are. They're commandments to you because of the spirit that is actually attributed to them. So these things in themselves automatically have to deal with you actually being just spirit centered and not being so flesh centered, where you actually just you view these things carnally, or you don't realistically view these things with the type of understanding and knowledge that you already have. You're not realistically applying common sense to these things, and that's more or less why you have so many issues and why you have so many problems inside of your lives, is just because of your lack of applying common sense to these things. But I'm just going to recap. So the past videos, obviously these things don't change, right? The whole premise of this earth and what is actually happening on the face of this earth, what is happening. If you've been watching these videos, you already know everybody's being puppeteered and manipulated under the guise that these devils are not running around frantically trying to get you to fall and take the bait of the temptations that they give you on a regular and daily basis. And to you, you automatically are just accustomed to having these things come inside of your lives. There was one time in your lives where obviously these things in themselves weren't affecting you, or I'll just make it really simple and I'll just simplify it. There was a period in your life where you just had a clear mind, you had a quiet mind. You're just like, well, whatever, this is, you weren't as erratic or chaotic as you are now. Obviously these things have, it's taken some time for them to actually obviously be able to get to that point. So on your end, it's good that you have that level of integrity and that level of understanding of yourself, and to hold on to that integrity. But the overall premise is that eventually we'll get to that point. You'll get to this point where you obviously are, you're being bombarded with thoughts on a regular basis. These devils already have like your case file or whatever. They could just look up all these things that they're obviously able to do, to you. They're actually able, all the legal grounds, obviously they're able to tell where you actually are headed based on the legal grounds that they actually have. So these legal grounds themselves are actually able to teach, this is able to teach, they essentially can control your path that you walk on and your fate through these legal grounds. And you could obviously, put these things to practice in your life when you actually are able to see all the things that you're able to do to a person, not in the manipulative sense, but they're obviously manipulating you. Then you obviously know where this individual is headed. So keep that in mind, as well as the only means for you to actually be able to, to be one step ahead of the enemies and the devils themselves is by you obviously delivering yourselves and getting into the deliverance ministry. And you're gonna realistically you're gonna reach that checkpoint in your life again, as you've always have reached that checkpoint. You're gonna have to take the leap of faith. You're gonna have to decide what's more important, your pastor's interpretation of theology, or just what Christ himself had already commanded you to do. He commanded you to cast out devils and to cleanse the lepers and to heal the sick and to heal yourselves as well. This applies to yourselves just as much as it applies to somebody else. So but yeah, so that's the overall premise. But the main reason why I obviously was making this video is just for you to be able to recognize the devil's real nature and how selfish and self-centered he obviously is. He does not care about anyone, and that's his nature down to its core. And that's something that you obviously need to recognize and know for certain, that whether he doesn't get you to actually take the bait and fall into temptation is not your overall priority, or not what you should be focused on. It's the fact that the devil is on a rampage, right? And anybody and anyone that he could take advantage of, he's going to do it. So obviously, if another person, you already know that he's going to be sending individuals to come inside of your life to automatically agitate you, to frustrate you, and to do all types of things to you. And under this premise in itself, you have to be ensuring that you're delivering these people ahead of time, just so the devil isn't able to actually use another person. That way they actually destroy and harm themselves and their lives. These things, you have to step back and look at the bigger picture. All honesty, it is really like the domino effect. And these things are really, as how I've been mentioning in these videos, it's not, God is not sweet. This is nothing sweet when you actually dabble into the spiritual side of life and the reality of what life actually is. You recognize that there's consequences for your actions. If you end up being petty, this can mean that you end up being stranded in the middle of the road because your tire, popped, and you got a flat tire. Next thing you know, you can't even drive. You're driving on the metal of the rims of the wheel itself, just because of your petty actions, as well as your actions in themselves. Everything that you do, every sin affects your children. If automatically through Eve's transgression, through her actually eating from the tree of knowledge after God commanded her not to, we all inherited death through that. Then obviously, these sins are instantaneously, right? You instantaneously have these things, instantaneous. You instantaneously have these things inside of your vessels right away. So, it's not as simple or as, as lovely as what your pastor says, that this is all by grace. This is about serious accountability because of the consequences, and serious responsibility on your end to ensure that you don't fall. You have all the necessary means to be able to ensure that you don't repeat the same old mistakes and the same old sins that you consistently always fall into. I mean, you know yourselves better than I do, but I'm nobody's parent. I'm not your parent. I'm not your mom. I'm not your dad. I'm not any of these things. I am going to view you in the same manner as how I'm going to view myself. If I have some sort of habits or some sort of sins that I need to stop immediately and to knock it off, then I'm going to tell you the same exact things, because I already know. I already been on that road. I've been on that path where I wanted to continually make excuses for myself and just repeatedly just say this and that. And now looking back, obviously I hate the fact that I was so gullible to those excuses and those reasonings when I could have just knocked it off and completely just cut it out. And that's in short why I'm obviously telling you these things. These things are as simple as you just stopping and never looking back and never doing those things again. But to you, it's already built itself into a habit. They've already psyched you out to the point that they've already made it feel like you can't, you have to somehow jump through hoops and do backflips, and you have to do the impossible for you to actually be able to knock it off completely. But that is a flat out lie. I've already been in that path where, I tried my very best to, and I just overcomplicated the situation in itself. And I tried so hard to obviously be this type of Christian, but I was still holding on to that mentality of it being as difficult as it actually wasn't. And because of that in itself, I was finally able to let it go, for me to actually be able to recognize that these things are realistically as easy as they sound and as easy as I'm putting it. But because of me holding on to that way of thinking, I just obviously was hurting myself, hurting my I wasn't realistically hurting my walk with Christ, but I was hurting myself in all honesty. Christ knows what you're fully capable of, and you're just bringing more and more damage and more rebukes inside of your vessel and inside of your lives, as well as the overall you unwillingly, oh wow, I'm so sorry for that, unwilling to actually be able to be submissive to the law of Moses. You don't want to submit yourselves to that, even though this in itself is like a bank. You're in debt, and the interest rates are incredibly high, and they continue getting higher year by year. And these things, you owe like $1 million, right? And you only make $20,000 dollars a year. So, and this money just keeps racking up, in all honesty. And it's pretty sad that the fact that you actually don't realize the real damage that you not actually obeying the law of Moses. These curses are still applicable to you if the blessings aren't. That's just something that should be just common sense for you, sadly, that if you want to accept these blessings, then by default you have to automatically accept what Christ is going to curse you with for your lack of obedience we already understand. We've come to that knowledge to be able to know that, you know what, we're under grace. We're not under that dispensation anymore for us to be so dependent on it for salvation. If Christ and God already had given us, a means to be able to escape from that burden, quote unquote. It's not even a burden. It's so easy to actually obey the law of Moses, and it just changes your heart so much when you actually recognize that you're obligated and you are commanded to actually take care of the orphans and the needy and the widows themselves, because they're commandments in the law of Moses. If it's a command, obviously these things are the same as honoring your mother and father and not lying, not stealing, and not doing things like that. So this is obviously one of the very basic principles that you need to really get over, because you still have this debt that is just accumulating, and you have so many curses inside of your life, and you don't even know what to do. And the proof is that you're not actually willing to accept these things. Some of these people obviously automatically get agitated and very frustrated when they hear another person preaching about obeying the law of Moses. That is, proof of legions inside of your vessel, but because it takes a different form and it's more widely accepted for you to actually, have this self-righteous anger that, that Christ wants us to be zealous for him and to be zealous for his atonement and not to put other individuals under the law. You feel justified by it. And this is the exact same principle that I was speaking about earlier, how stupid and gullible I actually was. I hate being to that extent, just being swayed and manipulated by devils like nothing, through my own logic and through my own reasoning. All these things themselves just made sense to me. And I've been there before. Even when I was a baby Christian, I wanted to do everything I possibly could to please Christ, and I didn't even want to stop eating pork until finally, Christ just really let me understand that sin is always just gonna be sin. There's nothing that you realistically can do. The Gospel of Mark, you have to realistically really detach yourself from the influencers and what they obviously have taught you, and really develop a mind of your own when you actually read these scriptures themselves and the context of what was actually written in Mark. I know it says that he made all meats clean, but it was specifically addressed towards the traditions of the Pharisees, and that's just something that it's in this very same chapter. What happened in that chapter? The Pharisees told him that they're going to defile the meat because they haven't washed their hands through their ritual. And obviously Christ himself was like, well, it's not what goes inside of a man that defiles a man, but what comes out of his heart that actually defiles a man. So he started listing a whole bunch of things: adultery, murders, and all these issues in themselves that we deal with on a regular basis. And we hear about these stories, and he said this is what defiles a man. And then he made all meats clean from the tradition. Now, obviously it wasn't specifically addressing, you can't realistically add to the scriptures at that point. There's no ability, or there's no means for you to actually add to any of those things when you just read those scriptures themselves at face value. But I mean, at face value, he's just specifically talking about the traditions and what just happened in that current situation. So I understand the confusion, to an extent, but it's your own logic and your own reasoning that is obviously, adding these things to the scripture that way, because it makes sense to you, because you're a Gentile. All of your life, you've been eating pork and shrimp. You're like, oh, so this is what that means, To you, it just clicks in your head that that's what it actually means, because you're viewing these things through Gentile perspectives. But obviously, you have to view these things through Jewish lenses. What are meats? What are the foods that God himself has given us? He's already given us, cow, lamb, and, goat and other things, but he has never fully given us the ability to actually eat any pork, shrimp, rat, or, anything else that is listed there, catfish. All these things in themselves have to deal with the traditions of the heathen and what they obviously were doing on a regular basis. And, now that we have a little bit more scientific backings as to why we shouldn't eat these things, because these were like bottom feeders, shrimp and other things like that. These things in themselves, they eat just the very garbage of the bottom of the, whatever. And that makes sense to you, right? That whatever they eat, you eat also. So this is why I'm sure you can't be ingesting the same types of garbage that these swine eat. They eat plastic, and you're going to put microplastics inside of your vessel and your kidneys, and they're just going to accumulate inside of your kidneys. And that's pretty scary in itself, We don't have enough data or research for us to know what these microplastics can actually do to us, and how they're actually able to be removed from the kidneys. I mean, some of these people are essentially going to have kidney failure just because of the microplastics in their kidneys alone, from whether it's tap water or this is a big issue in itself. And I know that's like a very it's in our time for us to be able to recognize and know, this is pretty scary that this is what is actually happening to us. This is not talked about in the scriptures whatsoever. We have no means for us to know what's actually going to happen to the human body through this. The same with cell phones, and same with 5G and everything else. We realistically don't have enough of research done to know what these waves actually do to our brains, and other things like that. We've had plenty of products that man has used in our lifetimes be discontinued just because of the harmful effects that they have on our bodies. Asbestos, making us have cancer. Cocaine was in Coca-Cola, and I could just go on and on about those things themselves. But the overall premise and the main premise that you need to really understand and really know for certain is that you can't rely on your own logic, and you just need to view these scriptures at face value for what they actually are. While yes, the context of themselves is what you need to be relying on, that is all that you realistically have. Not the influencers, not your pastors, not your preachers. That's all you need to rely on. The face value of the scriptures and the context that these scriptures are written in. And while yes, history in itself is actually able to teach you, of these events, and is able to expose the how real these prophecies actually are. Historical context is just as important as scriptural context. So keep that in mind as well. But so yeah. So I'm just gonna talk about that really fast, about how this amount of debt that you have in short accumulated, and you don't actually want to see it like that. You have a family tree, right? We're gonna start with you. You're this little twig. The twig goes off to a branch. That branch goes off to another branch, and that branch goes off to a bigger branch, and so on. And whatever. These things are just. This is your family tree, and then it all these back all the way back to Adam and Eve. Somehow we all ended up from Noah and from the seed of Noah, and so everybody right now currently that is walking the face of this earth is related under that premise and under that guise of Noah. So there's no race, and Noah came from Adam and Eve. So in short, these are our ancestors, and on the whole entirety of human race in itself is rooted in Adam and Eve, excuse me. And yeah, so but we're just gonna get to 40 generations or 30 generations. So yeah, after the two families, obviously when I'm just gonna obviously just break it down really fast and go in depth about it. But grace and peace be multiplied to you. The grace is to know what I'm saying, and the peace to know that is sent from God, and the mercies to be able to receive these messages, and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ and the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ reign in your hearts, and be with you all. So, excuse me, this family tree, right? 30 generations ago, man and wife, they become one flesh. So all of these sins from both sides of the family tree get grouped up together. If they've never even gotten into the deliverance ministry or known how to break curses or know that you can break these curses and these whatever, there's no such thing as any of these hexes or anything of that nature. These are done through obviously legal grounds and legalities because of witchcraft that you actually have. You don't have to worry about these witches cursing you with anything because it has no real power. The only real curses that you actually have to worry about are the curses that God can afflict you with. These are dangerous to you. The ones that these witches say that they can say anything that they want, they can say anything they want to you, and if you end up believing it, they obviously brought some sort of legal ground to come inside of your life because you actually believe it. So through your own gullibleness, your own naivety towards these things, and your ignorance about what you can't be cursed with and what you can't be afflicted with, is the reasons why you end up with more demonic suffrages and problems inside of your lives. If you just go off the basis of alone of what the scriptures are, then obviously all that stuff that they say, hexes and magic sticks and whatever in the spirits that attribute these things themselves and that come along with it, it's absolutely nothing. It's all spiritual. So it's obviously the demonic entities behind these things themselves that are, in short, trying to curse you. They're trying to find some sort of foothold or legality. But I'm going to go more in depth into that. Right now, obviously, it's just a family tree, and the severity of witchcraft and the spirit of witchcraft and what it actually is. The soul ties, they obviously can come, and through this in itself is obviously how you end up having this distorted and morphed image that is, just decrepit and old. And, it's pretty sad to actually be able to view these types of situations end up happening in another person's life, and something as well that you need to be cautious of and to need to be guarding yourselves in, because of this stuff is actually real. They're actually able to manipulate and toy with your soul. There's plenty of fragmented souls, and that in itself just has to deal with what they actually ended up robbing from you. These little characteristics that you obviously grew up with, these virtues and these qualities that you obviously had, they obviously fragmented your soul, in short, by getting you to just abandon that right way and good path and to completely just just replace it with the nasty habit. And in short, they end up like robbing bits of your soul and bits of your heart and bits of your mind and bits of that in short is what the devil has been doing all of your life. He's been robbing your mind of the integrities and uprightness that you actually have had. And the soul ties that actually come with your life, this is the most nastiest part about it, about the devil, is that these soul ties are formed with the actual products that you buy. They're formed with the toothbrushes, with the food that you eat, with the tea that you buy, and these things themselves are actually able to form these soul ties for the legality of these devils to come inside and to transfer spirits in your vessel. And that's in short why you obviously are able to, you're just bombarded and just full of these devils inside of your vessel. And this is why you can't think clearly sometimes, why you're not able to process certain things, and why these type of messages go over your head. Unless people realistically really say grace, mercy or worship or other things like that, that's the only means for you to really, click inside of your head, for you to be able to equate those things as Christian principles. But whenever somebody mentions, spiritual warfare, you already have recognized that there's consequences and retaliation from the devil if you actually engage in spiritual warfare. So that's a big, cross. No thanks. Red X, and I don't want to deal with that. And other things, deliverance. I have doubts in my faith of whether actually I'm able to deliver another person, but I've been there also, and it realistically is just a big mental block that is preventing you from actually delivering yourself, as well as being able to deliver other individuals. It's pretty easy and it's pretty simple. It's as simple as just telling the devil to acknowledge the presence of the devil and tell it to leave and tell it to go, and those things themselves will leave. But if you continue just wanting to create this level of doubt, or wanting to prove God wrong, or wanting to prove me wrong, that is not as easy as I just made it out to be, then obviously you're going to fulfill the desires of the devil, and it's going to stay inside of your life. So you're really going to have to try it out, right? You're really going to have to test it out and see if it's as simple as I actually have said, or you already made up your mind, right? You don't realistically want to see if those things are as simple as I just mentioned. So the legalities of what these things actually are, the spiritual warfare, right? Witchcraft. There's been an ongoing battle, all out war, since the beginning of the fall of the devil. And this is just in short was just been happening. There's nothing we could actually do about it except fight, preserve ourselves, pray to Christ, pray to God, and do other biblical and godly principles like that as well. Excuse me. And to be sober-minded, to do things like that, and to just in short be able to remain biblically sound and apply common sense to our lives. These soul ties that you obviously do develop, you develop it with an individual you don't actually recognize as a witch, and you obviously love this person so much. This person was low-key just doing everything that they possibly could to have you and get you to fall in love with them. And now your soul is actually knit to this person. And when your soul begins to be knit to this person, both of you end up sharing the same exact sin. So this individual could be a pedophile, just molesting children, as a Satanist, as a witch, and they're passing on these types of damnations and these types. Obviously, they did it with that specific intent to be able to transfer these spirits to you as well. And so and you're not even able to, you know, this is just the saddest part about it, is that so many Christians in, you know, powerless churches have these soul ties with witches. They don't recognize that these individuals are witches, and they did that for the specific purpose. They got charmed, they got swayed by this individual, and they're just like, wow, you know, this individual is just this amazing person. And automatically, you know, their soul was knit to them, and you know, they share in the same exact type of sins and virtues and, you know, blessings that the other person obviously has as well. But they also, you know, the good and the bad, obviously you both share those things in themselves. And if you actually have a witch who actually knows what they're doing, they obviously have more of a knowledge on what they're actually able to do with the soul, because of the devil himself. And because of that, they obviously go up to the devil. They're actually able to ask what types of legal grounds they're actually able uh, to use to be able to advance and further destroy this individual's, this person, their image, their character, and their posture, their body, whatever the case may be for this person. And realistically, unless God really has grace and mercy over your life, for you to be able to hear these messages and to just apply it to your life and see if this actually applies to you, and it does. There's just so many even products in itself that actually promote witchcraft, and you have cursed yourselves with that, um, with those spirits themselves, and that's why you have so many issues. And it's the same exact principle, the same exact thing. So this is obviously serious, right? You can't afford to be ignorant about who is a witch and who isn't a witch, and you just can't be the type of person that's just playing it. It's better to be safe than sorry, and you're just like, well, nah, you know, I don't. I feel like God is going to protect me, and God is going to do that. It's like, well, yes, He's obviously going to do many things for you, but it still requires action on your part, you know. So it's just like how this debt, right? You owe millions and millions of dollars to Christ for, you know, your lack of obedience to the law of Moses. God told you, you know, when you signed up to have a bank account for this bank, He told you what was going to happen if you didn't listen to His laws. He was going to curse you. Well, I would just say He's going to, you know, you're indebted. And the only means for you to actually be able to pay this debt off completely is to you actually talking to the bank teller that is Jesus Christ, right? And He's obviously, like, to Him it's nothing, right? He's like, He has no problem to be able to pardon your sins or to be able to pardon your debt, but you actually have to be willing to step inside of the bank and actually talk to Him and tell Him these things and to break these curses. And obviously that was the whole point of Him actually dying on the cross, is for Him to actually become a curse for us. This is how we get deliverance. This is how we get healings. This is how we get casting, the ability to cast out devils, to speak in tongues, to interpret tongues, and everything else that is written, to raise the dead, to cleanse the lepers, and all these other things themselves. But you know, your lack of action is in short the reasons why you continue damning yourselves and why you continue with this piled up debt. And honestly, and you're gonna end up going into the lake of fire, right? And that's just something that many individuals are you know, it's a bitter truth. You know, they feel like if they could dodge uh, that truth in itself, they won't have to go into the lake of fire. But obviously, God is going to hold you accountable to that. You know, is that you're trying to play dumb to it because you're scared, because you're doubting whether you actually are able to, you know, produce any of these results that Christ Himself told you to produce, and to do any of those things themselves. But obviously, you know, you're gonna have to see for yourselves. You're gonna have to stop being so scared. You're gonna reach that checkpoint inside of your life again and again and again. You're gonna sure have to really take the leap of faith eventually. I would just do it now, you know. I was scared myself, you know. I had my doubts, I had my whatever, you know, maybe I'm a bad person and God's not gonna let me fully deliver myself. Maybe He's been impatient with me all of my life. But honestly, He doesn't even care about any of that. He just wants you to 100% sanctify yourselves and make yourselves holier by ridding yourselves from these demonic manifestations in your mind, your heart, your soul, your will, and your emotions. And this isn't sure why you think the way that you do, you know. This is why you're actually stopped when you read these messages and you don't want to put these things to practice, or you don't think they apply to you. You don't think certain sins apply to you, and you don't want to, you know, play it safe instead of being sorry. This isn't sure why these things in themselves obviously end up coming inside of your life, and why you reject these messages themselves, because of your whole way of thinking. You know, you think this way, and you know, this is literally legions, and they already have mapped out your steps to try to get you to accept uh their temptations as truth, and that your pastor is 100% right, when in reality this is just common sense, right? The gospel in itself is just common sense for people to be able to recognize that Christ wants us to actually cast out physical devils out of our vessels, because they're inside of our vessels, and to not kid ourselves. If you've been a Gentile all of your life, what does that essentially imply? You have all of these curses from your lack of obeying the law of Moses, and anybody who doesn't obey the law of Moses is cursed. And if you're the first person inside of your family to obey the law of Moses, your whole family tree up until like Noah ish, and around that time, have not even bothered obeying the law of Moses. And that's pretty sad in itself. And those are all those generational curses that affect your mind, your witchcraft spirits that obviously are giving these witches and Satanists and devils to come inside of your life. They're like open doors, right? Nobody leaves their front door open of their house because of individuals and intruders coming inside of their homes. And these things in themselves is the same exact principle. You cannot leave any of these doors open. If you have the full capability and ability to shut these doors completely, to lock these doors, and to ensure nobody is actually able to get in. But this is still all part of your own action and your own diligence, correct? You still have to make a lot of efforts in actually being able to show Christ that you actually care about your soul, about your mind, your state of mind, and to care about the things that he obviously cares about. But it's really convenient, and I know that for you to just worship and to just get into on your knees and just be like, Lord, you already know that I love you, I'm so vulnerable, and other things like that, and not get into the spiritual side of Christianity. But Christianity without the spiritual power is useless. Is not even the gospel whatsoever. It's just a feel good message. It's a motivational speech, and that's in short all that it actually is. You cannot get into spiritual Christianity without the spiritual. You can't get into Christianity without the spirituality, in all honesty. And that's it. Whatever you believe in, whatever your pastors tell you, is just in short a holding cell, right? They're just holding you there, and to try to keep you there, and until Christ returns and all of you end up going into the lake of fire, which these witches laugh at, these devils laugh at. They think it's funny that they were able to hold you and restrain you in that little holding cell until through that little philosophy and through that little belief, sadly. And I know you think it's like a game, and you think it's funny because your pastor just says it, that this is just life, and yeah, it's grace. We're all saved by grace, brother, amen. And they say it with such enthusiasm, and they make you really believe it, and they try to make you feel like this condemned sinner, and this worthless sinner, that and it forces you to realistically really reflect on God's holiness. And because of those fruits in themselves, it's very subtle. It's a subtlety of the devil in itself. All of these ailments and suffrages can be completely averted if you just realistically recognize that you need to be dressed in white garments at all times. It starts being all about how incompetent you actually are and how inept you actually are, and it starts being about more accountability and responsibility on your end, and on your part, to ensure that you aren't staining your garments, your white garments, unnecessarily, right, for no apparent reason, just because of this and just because of that. I have to do this, and it obviously holds you to this level of responsibility, right? You have that when you actually you have that understanding when you actually put it like that. If you actually recognize that Christ wants you to remain in white, to stay in your white garments from now until Christ returns, instead of you just telling yourself, I'm just this wretched sinner, I need help. Well, yes, these things are obviously true. He already knows the things that you're more susceptible to, as well as yourself. You have every means and every ability to ensure that you never repeat those same mistakes again. And I already made mention of this earlier, how obviously I hate that way of thinking, and I hate how gullible and stupid I actually was to actually think that the things that they obviously were saying were holding water, and realistically they weren't even doing that. And now to look back, to be able to realize how simple these things actually were, that it was just a mental issue that I wasn't realistically able to let go during that time, that's the reason why I ended up with so much suffrage. Obviously I used to tell myself those same exact things as well, like, man, I'm just this horrible wretched sinner. But realistically, you're just beating yourselves up, right? You're beating yourselves down, and you're realistically just making yourselves feel completely worthless. And I'm here to tell you that that's not at all sane, right? That's some sort of disorder. That's a mental disorder, right? That individuals obviously are forming and they're developing inside of their minds. Nobody in the secular world ever wakes up like that without them actually saying they're depressed, right? Or for them to be able to acknowledge that there's an issue. You know, nobody ever realistically ever says those kinds of things that I'm such this. I'm such this horrible person, and nobody's ever, I can't believe that Christ saved me, and other things like that. And because you make it a Christianity thing, you make it a legalistic thing. That is because I'm a Christian. I recognize my volatile nature, my vile nature, and I can't believe that Christ saved a wretch like me. You hold on to that way of thinking, and it doesn't realistically progress you any forward. You just stay stuck in that way of thinking, being fully dependent on Christ when you're actually fully capable of ensuring that your garments stay white and they don't actually get stained by the cares of this earth, through bitterness, through frustration, through dealing with frustrating people or whatever. Everybody has to deal with these people, right? And we're all going through the same exact situations at the same exact time that you're going through. Secular people are able to pass these tests because of whatever, because of moral integrities, or they're not realistically as phased. They already recognize that life is life. But then it gets to you, right? And just because you're a Christian, you automatically say, "Oh Lord, you're gonna have to hold my tongue." When realistically, if you were to just remove that part of the equation out of whatever formula that you actually have, you obviously would not even deal with those situations in the same exact manner as how you're dealing them. If you would just take out the fact that you're a Christian out of those things themselves, and you would just be like, well, I realistically don't care, It's like, well, whatever, people are just gonna be people. They've always been people, and this is just something that I can't change, Is you're readily able to forgive those situations and to be able to overlook those situations because of your overall maturity that is inside of your heart. Instead of you being so dependent on the Christian title for everything, to make excuses for your impatience, that everybody has to be accustomed or has to bow down to the same types of philosophies that you live by. It's just, you're able to forgive individuals in those situations a lot easier and easily than if you were if you were a Christian. So I know I do it all the time, right? I try to imagine if there was no God, and I'm realistically just bound by my own integrities and my own hearts itself. And this removes a lot of the pressure that is inside of my mind and inside of my head, for me to actually be able to recognize, this is like a moment of peace and clarity in my head, for me to actually be able to recognize how much pressure I'm actually essentially putting on myself because of the knowledge of God and who He actually is. Realistically, some of these Christians really do take life really serious, and I know life really is serious, but for the most part, you realistically don't have to get into another individual's face about these things themselves. Not everything is, well, I don't want to say not everything is demonic, but definitely if you were able to recognize, if you were able to just practice that, right, and say that not everything is demonic, that in itself would just remove all the pressure that you obviously have to ensure that you are not succumbing to these temptations and the test of the devil itself. It's too much for you, in short. The type of knowledge that obviously you've received in this lifetime about how, everything is demonic and the temptations itself. This is your means of you being able to cope with those types of situations. You don't have any means or any healthy forms to be able to cope with those situations yet, but the overall premise is you need to relax. You need to take a chill pill, right? You need to completely just be able to recognize that and live that type of mentality, and to live in peace in the same exact manner as before you actually receive those things and those types of informations themselves. But these are just crutches and assets to be able to get you to finally let go of that pressure and the unnecessary, to bring some peace and relief inside of your life, and to stop being so, because it's overwhelming. I know, dude. I already know it. I have to deal with these things on a regular basis, and you realistically don't have to deal with them in the same exact manner as how I have to deal with them. But just know that obviously these things are a lot easier for you than they are for me, and with that, obviously I can't help you out. Whatever, it is what it is, and you don't move on with those things. But more or less, you actually practicing that out is able to you're able to recognize that it's all a mental game and it's all a mental issue. These constructs and the way you actually are able to view these things in your life are essentially holding you back, right? You're not realistically being able to operate fully as a normal, functioning human being because of these truths in themselves. You can't cope with these situations yet, sadly. And I know you want to, and I know you want to get to that point, but these things in themselves are just they're weighing down on you. In short, the whole Christianity walk and you and having to obviously be perfect as Christ Himself is perfect is just in short too much for you. I've been there before. I just mentioned that earlier, but trust me, I'm able to finally accept that that is just easy, and it's just your whole mindset of you not being able to realistically accept that it's as easy as it sounds and as easy as I'm saying it is, and because of that, man, when you actually are able to finally let that way of thinking go, and this is going to be God's grace, is obviously going to be able to aid you out and to be able to help you let that way of thinking go. Everything is just going to make so much sense on why these situations come inside of your life, the intents behind it. All of it has to do with, purifying yourselves for you to actually recognize that there's absolutely no alternative to God's ways. Excuse me. Um, to Christ's commandments, and just anything that Christ Himself commands you, anything that is actually good. You don't have anybody influencing any of your decisions. All of these things come from your heart itself, and you just begin just